Alex Shurikat presents my very emotional parody audiobook, Steamgelion! Roles played by Соня Иванов, Синдзи Икари,
Marina Kalina,
Misato Katsuragi, Rimaka Gage, Ritsuko Akagi, Commander Ivanov, Gendo Ikari, Raya Enama, Rei Ayanami,
Hanka Litvinenko,
Asuka Langley,
Ali Katzman,
Aida Kensuke, Toля Suzuhara, Todzi Suzuhara,
Roma Kazi,
Ryuji Kazi. First season, 17th episode. At the end of another incredibly hot training session, during which the pilots and Comet Kalina quarreled 5 times and nearly fought once, Comet Kalina allowed everyone except Anka to disperse. Looking at how Comet Kalina was raking robot figures, building models and other training equipment into a pile to collect them in a sack, Anka asked.
So, what do you want from me? Wait a minute.
Said Comet Kalina, putting the sack with inventory in the safe.
Okay, let's get started. Attention, my great soldier!
Anka shrugged but straightened up.
Hello,
Comet Kalina said in an official tone.
answer me. Are you a real warrior?
Yes, ma'am, I am! With heat confirmed Anka.
Does a real warrior always follow orders?
Anka immediately became alert and putting her hands on her sides, answered.
So plus always, but what? Attention.
Anka reluctantly straightened up again.
Galio, do you know what a trial launch of the Soyuz AG is expected? What's right, ma'am. I do.
Anka said without much enthusiasm, anticipating the mention of the history of the Communist Party.
Galio, your new colleague, the fourth pilot, has been elected. But he had one condition. Therefore, understand the full importance of the task entrusted to you in the face of the Soviet Union. The young man agreed to become a pilot only if you agree to go on a date with him.
Anka raised her eyebrows in surprise and asked.
What and what's all? And what about the history of the Communist Party?
Comrade Kalina was even taken aback by such a weak reaction and muttered.
The history of the Wait, you are not going to make a fuss, are you? Why should I make a fuss? It's so romantic! A high risk his whole life for one date with me! By the way, who is he?
Comrade Kalina pulled out the personal file of the new pilot from her boot and handed it to Anka. Flipping through the paper, Anka saw a photo of Tola and was amazed.
Wow, Toля! Well, Well, why not how? And when will our date be? After the launch.
Comrade Kalina smiled. The next day, in the morning, the phone rang in Sanya's apartment, and he, like Raya the last time, went to Undergunker instead of school.
And where are Tola and Sanya?
Alec asked in surprise, sitting down at his desk before the first lesson and turning his head from side to side.
Heh.
Anka said authoritatively.
Comet Agagevich is tormenting Sanya. And Tola, ooh, he won't recognize Tola soon. What will happen to him? Date with me!
Raya turned her head to those who were talking and clarified.
Isn't it the fact that he'll become the first pilot? Well, what is special about that piloting? A date with me is a worthwhile event!
Alec looked away and sighed heavily, saying,
How I would like to go on a date with Comrade Kalinina.
Having spent the school day without excesses, the children were about to leave the classroom to go home. There was no training today, because in connection with the upcoming launch of the Soyuz AG, Comet Kalina was given an additional day off. But suddenly, old and very wise teacher clapped his hands and announced,
Children, I almost forgot. Homework!
Having said these words, he pulled out a pack of some sheets of paper from his briefcase.
And say on the topic why I fell in love with the history of the Communist Party on a special form. Please come and take one form.
When Anka, Raya and Alec approached the teacher's table for forms, the teacher handed 4 sheets of paper to Anka and Alec and said,
Alec, hand over the form to Suzuharu. And you, Litvinenko, to your fiancé. Teacher!
Anka instantly exploded.
Are you kidding me, sir? This is my revenge on you for my grandson. After a date with you, he asks to go to the front every day. Interestingly, Toria won't.
Raya thought aloud. Finally, the children left school, and after saying goodbye to Alec, Raya and Anka moved out along the street.
What damn history of the Communist Party again!
Anka muttered angrily.
Well, I'll write an essay for him. He himself will ask to go to the front. Be careful, Garu.
Raya warned.
In my opinion, our essays will be read in the Kremlin. Let them read at least in the mausoleum. Well, listen, Rust. It would be indecent if I went to visit the guy alone, wouldn't it? Come with me. But you sit alone at his apartment almost every day.
Raya was surprised.
I can hear you singing with the guitar. Well, anyway, let's go. Okay. What a brave you all.
Then Raya adjusted the strap of the radio transmitter and said,
You too, Galio. But when I saw you for the first time, I honestly thought that you were a complete asshole. Why?
Almost with tears in her voice, asked Anka.
The thing is how you looked at me at that moment. Like a drunken man at a naked woman.
And so they were in front of the door of Sanya's apartment. After the call, the lock clicked and Count Kalina in the pioneer uniform appeared before them.
We would like to convey something to Sanya.
Anka reported, explaining the purpose of the visit.
That's what I understand, true friendship.
Praised Count Kalina, moving away from the threshold.
Man, Sanya is still tormented by Count Agich. Come on, let's wait for him together.
Anka and Raya entered and received the cat's attention. Unexpectedly, Count Kalina smiled to herself and, opening the door to Sanya's room, said,
Please stay in his room for a while, and I'll cook something. I'd love to,
said Anka, boldly entering Sanya's apartment first. Closing the door behind them, the girls looked around. Sanya's room looked neat in a military way. Everything in it was located parallel perpendicularly, and even dust particles lay in places what seemed intended for what. Anka rubbed her palms and whispered,
Well, Rust, let's look for a little. Maybe he has started stealing panties too? To hell with such entertainment.
Raya was outraged.
What if we find your panties?
While Raya was in doubt, Anka looked under the bed, in drawers of the desk, and looked to see if there was anything erotic between books on the bookshelf.
Strange,
Anka said disappointedly.
No panties, no naked hulls. He probably hid it all well.
Approaching the wardrobe, Anka opened one of its doors and froze, her eyes widening at what she saw inside.
Rust, come here quickly!
Anka called, continuing to stare at the contents of the wardrobe. Raya cautiously crept up and timidly looked inside. What she saw almost knocked the ground out from under her feet. A large dakimakura was found there, on which Raya was depicted. In her school uniform, and even with the transmitter on her back.
Oh my Kremlin! What a noble Sashko he is!
Anka said in admire.
We have a purest love! You are not even pictured in a buffing suit! I can imagine what kind of dakimakura found Marina after the party hides in his wardrobe.
Raya felt that some comment was required from her, but all she could do now was blush more and more. Suddenly, the doorbell was heard and instantly concluding that it was Sanya who most likely came. Anka and Raya hastily closed the wardrobe and leaned up in the middle of the room. And it really returned Sanya. When he entered his room, Raya stammering chattered.
We touched nothing, except for garbage.
Anka added an assembly. What garbage, Galю? Sanya was surprised.
Well, Sashko, haven't you watched Evangelion?
It was some morning. Comrade Kalina was about to leave for the trials of the Sales AG and said goodbye to Sanya.
Sanya, I will likely be away for a few days,
She said.
That's why I asked Anka and Raya to look after you. Prepare food, put you to bed.
What? Sanya exclaimed, blushing even more when Raya after meeting Sanya's Dakimakura. Maybe Uncle Roma is better.
Not at all.
Comrade Kalina snapped.
Precisely, Anka and Raya. We must provide you with wonderful memories from your youth. Moreover, you must learn to understand a woman's heart.
Sanya froze, imagining the process of understanding two women's hearts at the same time, and even in his apartment without the presence of adults. And then the doorbell rang.
Who is it so early?
Comrade Kalina thought aloud and opened the door. Alec appeared in the corridor. As soon as he saw Comrade Kalina, Alec, very agitated, folded his hands in front of his face and exclaimed,
Comrade Kalina, I love you! I love you! I love you!
A military truck was driving along the road among a large convoy of vehicles. And for this reason, Comrade Kalina, who was driving, could not indulge in her need for speed. The truck crawled relatively slowly, however, Comrade Kalina also looked kind of gloomy.
Rima,
Comrade Kalina suddenly called. What? Responded Comrade Agevich, who was sitting nearby.
just imagine it. Today Alec, well, the one who is Saya's friend, confessed his love to me.
Comrade Agevich instantly perked up and whispered fervently. And what was your reaction?
What could it be? He's still a schoolboy, and I have a Romachan actually.
In other words, you just broke a young heart.
Well, not exactly. I told him that if he grows up, gets me the squirrel that knows nuts with golden shells, brings 33 soldiers with the commander Chernomor, and gives a scarlet flower, then maybe I'll think.
Comrade Agevich turned to the truck door and said, Well, you're a real bitch. At school, during all the lessons, Sanya, Anka and Raya looked sympathetically at Alec, who had survived the heavy blow, sitting with his head down. So far, it has not been possible to talk to him, since Alec, having barely received the terrible refusal from Comrade Kalina, immediately ran away. And at every school break, he also hid somewhere. Finally, the last lesson ended and everyone began to go home. Despite Sanya's protest and his suggestion to leave Alec alone, for the time being, Anka separated from the rest of the pilots and moved forwards after Alec, who was going sullenly in the other direction. Having caught up with Alec, Anka went next to him. Finally, she put her hand on his shoulder and said,
Don't worry too much, Alec. You have your whole life ahead of you. And this is just the first love collapsed. Oh, I'm fine, Anka.
He sadly said.
Thank you.
Anka looked into Alec's eyes, which looked as if everything was not very fine with him, and said,
Listen, Alec, can I ask you something? You can, Anka.
Indifferently answered Alec, killed by bitter thoughts.
What did you find in this drunkard, stupid, vulgar woman?
Alec looked up at the sky and dreamily said,
She's so feminine.
Poor Anka caught so hard that she almost got caught by a passing ambulance. In the evening, when Sanya was about to quietly listen to Mayak after putting the last dot in his essay about love for the history of the Communist Party, someone rang at his door. As you might guess, after opening the door, Sanya found Anka and Raya on the threshold. Moreover, both girls had aprons over ordinary clothes. And in addition, Anka was holding a ladle in her hands and Raya had a broom with her.
Well,
Cheerfully said Anka.
Sashka, shall we start?
Sonia took a step back and collapsed on the floor from an excess of feelings. The girls took this as an invitation to enter and, stepping into Sonia's apartment, looked around in a businesslike way.
So,
Anka continued.
Rust, it would be necessary to sweep. And while I cook, what are you ordering?
Inquired Raya.
Oh, come on! If you want sweep and I'll cook.
But Raya's stern look made Anka firmly understand that she failed to deceive Raya. And with a sigh, handing Raya the ladle, Anka picked up the broom herself. Sonia got up from the floor with difficulty and said, heading to the bath and intending to hide there. I'll take a bath.
What's the right decision, dear?
Anka approved.
Girls do not like it when boys are not washed.
Hiding in the bathroom, Sonia immediately scolded himself for the fact that he still had not fixed the latch. Turning on the water, he began to hold the door by the handle and seriously decided to sit out here, naively believing that the girls will soon get tired of playing housewives and they will leave his abode. While Raya, under the supervision of Oingo's cooking, Anka conscientiously swept the hallway. Afterward, she decided to clean up Kalina's room. But as soon as Anka slipped there with a giggle, she immediately buried her gaze in a piece of paper hanging on the wall, the inscription on which read,
Anka, what are you doing here? Get out, or you will wash the toilets at the headquarters for 3 days in a row.
Showing her tongue at the poster, Anka wanted to turn around and leave, but suddenly she grunted slyly and thought. Then she crept up to the dresser in which most likely Kalina's underwear was stored. Carefully pulling out the top drawer, she found there an even more severe message.
Anka, I warn you. 3 days of washing toilets and aftermath, you will be enrolled in Akagevich Radio Club.
Cautiously closed the drawer, Anka hurriedly left the menacing room. Having finished cleaning the living room, Anka looked into the kitchen, where I was already setting the table and noticed.
Sashka takes a long bath. Yes, he does.
I agreed, laying out the forks.
I'll hurry him up.
When Anka reached the bathroom, she knocked on the door and said,
My sweet, let me rub your back.
In no case. Sonia immediately responded and grabbed the door handle even harder.
Sashka, come out. Raya cooked up a whole feast. Where?
I'm on a diet.
What are you talking about? On what diet? What's wrong with him there?
Raya asked as she approached.
He hesitated for some reason. Sonia, come out.
Raya called and added, very embarrassed.
Are you dinner cooked?
Sonia continued hesitating. Then Anka pulled the door handle and noticed that the door was not locked.
Well!
Anka immediately shouted fervently and began to pull with all her strength.
He did not fix the latch! Raya, help me! Now we'll take care of him!
No need! Sonia was frightened, becoming desperately holding the door. But the girls, like furious tigresses, got down to business and made such an effort on the door that they literally pulled Sonia into the hallway. Having flown out of the bathroom following the open door, Sonia with a yell knocked both girls to the floor and grabbed with his hands. Well, what else could he grab with his hands? In short, in 1 minute, Sonia was sitting in the empty apartment with red cheeks from the most powerful slaps in the face, and sullenly stroked the cat. Yeah, he muttered. What wonderful memories, damn it. At this time, the military convoy of self-propelled guns, tanks, armored personnel carriers and trucks finally approached the test site of the Soyuz AG. Here, right from the Kola Peninsula, the same secret 4-line railway track led, as in the 6th episode. And on the platform, among the armada of armored trains already familiar to us, an unimaginably huge wooden box towered. On the box there was an inscription in English. This is not a Soyuz at all. Military machinists began to turn around, take up positions, and Comet Kalina and Comet Agevich got out of their track and began to look at the packaging of the Soyuz AG. It's an excellent military trick, Comet Agevich remarked approvingly, nodding at the inscription on the box.
Yeah, that's fine.
Comet Kalina agreed, and then, behind them, a voice was heard, which they had already heard somewhere. 8 minutes late! You are the first women I have been waiting for! The ladies turned around and saw in front of them the nameless colonel who transported Anka from Ukraine along with her Soyuz.
Comrade Colonel!
Comrade Kalina exclaimed with delight.
How many scenes, how many episodes?
Oh my Kremlin! Nameless Colonel immediately changed his anger to joy and spread his arms. Comrade Kalinina! My love! How glad I am to see you! Comrade Kalina and Nameless Colonel rushed to each other and embraced. After that, Nameless Colonel met Comet Agevich and immediately invited the ladies to the flagship armored train. Leading them into his compartment, the colonel looked around and closed the door. Then he put 3 glasses on the table, a plate with chopped bacon, and a bottle in which there was 750 grams of fire water.
Comrade Colonel.
Comrade Kalina said somewhat timidly, remembering the face of Comrade Ivanov when he subtly hinted to her that if Comrade Kalina decided to get drunk before the test, she will be sent to a kindergarten work as a teacher for a week.
Hey, don't drink today.
Wah, do I drink? The colonel was surprised and pointed to the bottle. There is only 1 bottle for free! Come on, ladies! To victory!
It's impossible not to drink to victory, of course.
Comrade Kalina answered hesitantly.
But
But is not but, said the colonel and began pouring. The glasses clinked. The ladies had not yet swallowed the snack, as the colonel had already taken up the bottle again. Comrade Colonel, Comrade Agevich said, we have the test today, so let's drink to the test. He immediately offered and handed the prepared glasses to the ladies. We will test such a wonderful Soyuz! Wow! Half an hour later, Comet Kalina banged her glass on the table on which the empty bottle stood, and rubbing her palms, said,
well, let's start testing. Fire to boilers!
Put aside the fire! Comet Agevich responded and waved her hand crookedly. This robot is purely electric! Exactly. The Soyuz, designed in the Murmansk region, was a completely new model. It had neither a boiler nor a turbine. It was a combat machine for the operation of which nothing but electricity was required. Moreover, all this electricity came for it from a huge battery which was on the back of this Soyuz.
Okay, let it be electric.
Comet Kalina was not at all impressed.
Listen to my command.
Stop! Comet Agevich objected. I'm in charge of any tests. In order to avoid objections from Comet Kalina, Comet Agevich pulled out the charter of the star from her pocket and poked the appropriate page in Comet Kalina's nose.
You're a bore.
Comet Kalina immediately reacted and stuck out her tongue. When she looked at the empty bottle, the colonel, who was closely monitoring the situation, immediately put his hand under the table and pulled out another bottle from under it. Comet Kalina perked up, and the colonel winked at the ladies and suggested, so, let's drink to peace and mutual understanding. Meanwhile, Tolle, in a white uniform and with a revolver, with which Division Commander Chipaev most likely did not drown, was sitting in the most armored car of the motorcade and reading the instructions for the Soyuz AG. Finally, he got tired of it, and he demanded to let him out of the car, thrusting the instructions under his armpit. The guards opened the door for Tolle and watched him with trepidation. Immediately seeing the package with his robot, Tolle moved in its direction. The Red Army soldiers, scaring around, stared at Tolle as if he were a mighty celebrity, and sometimes even shuddered at the sight of him dropping their weapons. Having reached the platform, Tolle climbed onto it and, moving along the wall of the box, found a door on it. But there's a booth at this door, in which a small but very harmful dachshund was sitting, performing security functions. Seeing Tolle, the dog growled and poked its head menacingly out of the booth. Tolle stopped in some confusion, since nothing was said in the instructions for interacting with security dachshunds. Apparently, the dog, trained to conduct active defense, did not perceive Tolle's stop as if his refusal of intentions and got out of the booth entirely, clinking the chain. Tolle already wanted to retreat in disgrace, but when he realized that now he's a military man and accordingly armed. Following this thought, a brutal smile spontaneously appeared on Tolle's face. His hand reached for the holster, and the dachshund became alert and sat down. When she suddenly took off and ran in the opposite direction, dragging the booth behind her. Hiding around the corner of the robot's packaging, the dachshund began to bark very actively at someone there. "So it will be with each of you," Tolle said, and again went to the door. The door was without a lock, but sealed. Breaking the seal, he went inside and found himself in pitch darkness. But there was a switch on the wall, and therefore the electric light showed us the huge combat machine that sat compactly on its knees in the pose of a bleeding Japanese man. By the way, the cockpit of this robot was arranged in such a cunning way that now it was still in an upright position, as it was fixed between the shoulders on a hinge, like a swing. Behind this swinging cockpit, a serious armored hose came out, in which all the control cables apparently were hidden. A ladder in the form of metal brackets, starting on the body of the robot right outside the door, beckoned to get into the cockpit as soon as possible. Tolle immediately did it, taking the instructions for his robot in his teeth. Having reached the hatch, Tolle turned the handles of the combination lock, dialing the default secret password in the form of 4 zeros, and opened the hatch. A faint light immediately lit up inside the narrow opening in the armor. Having made his way into the cockpit and somehow shutting the hatch behind himself, Tolle looked around. The cockpit, of course, was very impressive. Everywhere there were instruments, lights and buttons. Sitting in a chair, Tolle, following the instructions, put on a helmet and then bravely flipped the main power switch. There was a growing noise of fans, the illumination of the scales of all instruments and buttons lit up. "Rise and shine!" Tolle said and pressed the button with the inscription "Unpacking." The Soyuz AG shuddered with all its mighty body and began to straighten up smoothly. The box cracked at the seams and, as if bursting, fell apart on 4 walls and the ceiling, almost crushing the security dachshund. And the Soyuz AG appeared before us in all its glory. So, Tolle sat contentedly, feeling like a real pilot and looking through the lower view mirrors at how the Red Army soldiers began to scatter, hastily moving away from the Soyuz AG. Placing his hands in the rods that control the upper limbs of the Soyuz AG, Tolle, clearly remembering the instructions, forced the Soyuz AG to step forward. "It's better when naked girls!" Tolle exclaimed in euphoria when the robot confidently stepped off the platform and moved on. And then suddenly something clicked on the ceiling of the cockpit, swaying in time with the steps. And a whole stream of American Playboy magazines poured on Tola. Staring at an erotic photo of one of the covers, Tola grabbed the magazine, opening it with trepidation. And the Zeus AG, meanwhile, imperturbable, continued to walk. In the same obscene moments, the feast in the compartment of the flagship armor train continued. Comrade Kalina, who was sitting with the colonel in an embrace, put her hand on the colonel's chest and asked,
Comrade Colonel, what's your military rank?
I'm a colonel. The colonel reminded her for the third time.
It's amazing, Comrade Colonel, but you should definitely be promoted to a general.
Deviating to Comrade Agevich, who was nodding off nearby, Comrade Kalina asked a question, winking.
Excuse me, ma'am. Do you have a separate room here?
Comrade Agevich drawled with displeasure. You got drunk, the last hope of communization.
What? Asking for a fighting engineer, Chen.
And then suddenly the F rumbled and trembled along with the glasses on the table.
What's happened?
Comrade Kalina inquired without interest, and at that moment the flagship armor train was shaking by a terrible blow. The ceiling of the compartment abruptly crumbled in half of its height, as if some giant had stepped on the roof. The doors and the armored shutter of the window were skewed, making it impossible to open them. The electric light went out, when the train rocked another blow, and then the receding shudders of the F began to be heard. The heroes who found salvation on the floor looked around, content with the narrow rays of light penetrating through the cracks. Then they looked at each other.
Damn it.
Comrade Kalina said, covering the still unfinished bottle with herself.
I was just getting ready to go to the toilet.
And I, admitted Comrade Agevich. And I, the colonel added worriedly. Meanwhile, in Vanderjunker, Comrade Ivanov was sitting in his office and, suspecting nothing, was counting the consumption on ethyl alcohol. Well, comrades, he drawled, making an entry in the register. In the current month, 53 liters of ethyl alcohol was spent for technical purposes. Suddenly thinking, Komitonov pulled out the bottom drawer of his desk and, looking at the bottle lying there, made corrections in the document. No, 54.5 liters. And at this serious moment, someone called on the phone. Speaking, Commander Ivanov. What? Incident with the Soyuz AG? Kalina must have been drunk! You can't find her! Okay, what about the Soyuz AG? Goes to the Moscow big city? Soon Comrade Ivanov was already at the command center and, in the absence of Comrade Kalina, stood at the periscope personally. The engineers were preparing the Soyuzes for combat and a taxi had already been sent for the pilots. Is it really treason? Comrade Ivanov said, looking at the still small figure of Tola's robot. Has our boy been recruited? And so Anka, Raya and Sanya arrived. Anka and Raya turned up their noses at Sanya, and he himself looked gloomy and also looked away from them. Having met the pilots in the hangar, Comrade Ivanov stared dumbfoundedly at his son's red cheeks and asked, Son, what's on your face? Wonderful memories, Sanya grumbled. Oh, okay, take your seats. The lifts hummed hard and the Soyuzes began to rise to the surface. The Soyuz AG was already walking along the outskirts of the city, trampling small buildings, stalls and everything what came under its feet. Tanks and other military machines moved behind the Soyuz AG at a respectful distance. Gotta rest small. Comrade Ivanov began directing the battle. Form a wedge, small on the top. Gotta rust cover him from the flanks at a distance of 100 meters.
Ha!
Hanka answered over the radio.
I will not fight next to Lacquer! And I will not too!
Raya agreed.
You put me out of the bathroom yourself!
Sanya snapped. Of the bathroom? Asked Komitonov indignantly, imagining an indecent scene. But, like a real officer and a father, he immediately controlled himself and ordered. Set aside the conflict. Galu, Rast, Small, I order to stop the Soyuz AG!
To stop?
Sanya responded angrily.
No, I'll stop it!
The Soyuz AB raised its mace and sped forward. Like a multi-ton whirlwind, it flew up to the Soyuz AG and hit it on the shoulder with the mace with all its might. And then it began to beat the Soyuz AG so that only the armor flew apart. Son, Komitonov murmured, looking with wide eyes at how the brand new combat machine was turning into scrap metal. Stop it! I told you to just stop the Soyuz AG! But Sanya did not hear the words of his father. Throwing away the mace, he began to tear the body of the Soyuz AG with hands, venting his youthful anger on it. Turn off his fuel oil supply! Komitonov shouted in despair, clutching his head, but it was already too late. Having smashed the battery on the ground and splashed everything around it with acid, Sanya grabbed the remains of the Soyuz AG by the cockpit with a rotor off its upper armor plate, and only then calmed down as he saw his friend inside. Tole, finally noticing something was wrong, and raised his head from the next Playboy, looked around. Seeing what Sanya had turned his new Soyuz into, Tole dropped the magazine from his hands and screamed in wild horror. To be continued.